Hey, everybody. Welcome to our next webinar on our 2024 renewals. I am joined, as always, with Alyssa. Alyssa is the all-star on our team when it comes to franchise compliance. And today we're going to discuss a couple things really important for a franchise looking to grow, item 19 and item 20, and how we can get in the mindset of a prospective franchisee and really develop a game-changing, what I call a game-changing item 19, and then validate through item 20. So really important stuff. Alyssa, thanks for joining again.
Of course.
Appreciate it. So as always, the webinar series, we have a couple goals throughout the series. One, prepare now for a great 2024 FDD, right? So the first couple webinars, we were discussing timing and getting your financials together. I hope everybody got their stuff in order. I hope everybody's working on their financials, and I hope things are progressing along. If they're not, you should start right away. Today is December 11th. So you want to make sure that you get things moving as soon as possible. The reason being, we want to get in early because we want to avoid dark periods and registration delays, right? So which ultimately leads to sales, having more sales and developing more locations. So we don't want anything getting in the way of that as we go through the process. We want to get a competitive advantage over our competitors, right? So we want to think about it. We don't want to scramble around at the end of in April. As Alyssa could tell you, the month of April is chaos here, and we don't really have too much time to plan and grow. People usually calling Alyssa on April 29th saying, I just started getting my audit together. So it creates a lot of problems. So what we want to do is we want to be proactive and want to have a winning strategy for 2024 and every year following. But in this case, we're going to focus on 2024. Energizing your item 19. That's what we're doing today. We're going to figure out different ways we can think about our item 19 and how we can strategize to help grow our brands. And like I mentioned, avoid the last minute frenzy where opportunities may be lost, right? If we file the day before our deadline, our dark period's months, and we could lose a couple deals. So this is literally tens of thousands of dollars at stake. Get it in early, start the process early, and let's plan and be effective. So just going through some item 19 basics first. I know some of us on the call and some people that are going to watch the video, they're in the franchising industry for a while, may know this already, but it's always good to have a refresh and think about it again, right? Even if we think we know it should be in there, sometimes you hear something that's new to you and can really change things. So item 19 is actual or potential financial performance of a franchise business. Right. So this could mean either your company-owned locations, affiliate locations, and your franchise locations if you have franchise locations. Right. So really, it's a performance metric that we can show in our item 19 based on our company-owned outlets or our franchise outlets. And there's certain qualifications. One thing we're not going to go too deep into here today is the legalities of the item 19. We're going to really focus on making more impactful and effective item 19. We'll do a separate webinar on the legalities of item 19. So, but this webinar is really focused on how can we energize our item 19, not just put in gross sales and call it a day, right? So that's really what we're going to talk about. Technically, item 19 is the only item in the FDD that's optional. We don't have to disclose any information. We can say we're not disclosing any information this year, right? So we put optional in quotes because when we think about this, the whole idea of developing the franchise and the FDD and kind of, really trying to grow the brand is to what we call win at franchising. We use that term a lot in our office, win big at franchising, win at franchising. So if you want to win big at franchising, there's no way you cannot have an item 19 in your FDD, right? It's mandatory if you want to grow your brand. I don't care what anyone else says. The broker networks are not going to look at your opportunity if there's no item 19. The FSOs are not going to do it. So if it's something that you can't really put in today for one reason or another, you definitely want to have a game plan in place to make sure that next year we'll be able to do it. And there's a lot of strategy behind that, which we work with our clients on a lot. But any questions you have on that, we'd be happy to answer. But it's really important to, if you can't do it today, have a plan to do it tomorrow. And that's the real thing. So in my mind, it's not optional. Legally optional, in my mind, not optional. Must be representative of the franchise business. So this one is always interesting where, for example, we'll have a service brand that has a territory of an entire state, right? They do services throughout the entire state. But the franchises that they're selling are limited to 200,000 people, right? The territory is for 200,000 people. So if we show numbers where we have, 5 million people in the state, but we're selling locations that are 200,000 people, that doesn't translate and is not representative of the franchise that we're offering. So we want to be strategic and figure out ways how we can make that, make that distinction and make sure our item 19 can show what we're actually selling as the franchise business in the franchise offering. So that's really important. Also, not going to cover that in detail today, but that's more of a legal conversation, a separate webinar for sure. The item 19 can be based on historical data, right? What happened last year, 2022, 2023, if we're talking about 2024. It could also be based on projections, right? That's what the law says. It can be based on projections and pro formas. As a lawyer, we highly recommend staying away from the projections. If you are going to do projections, they have to be substantiated, and there's a really legal compliance aspect to that, which we don't usually recommend. We have a couple clients that do it for certain reasons, but they have to be the exception in my mind. So we'll talk about that a little more later on, but generally we're talking about historical data, and that's really what we're going to focus on today more than anything else. And one thing to always keep in mind, the item 19 numbers, anything in the FDD is a public document, and we have to treat it that way. There are certain states where we can pull anyone's FDD off of, right? So we have to consider the FDD and all the information in it as public information. And we never want to have something out there where our numbers wouldn't match one way or the other of some other information that's disclosed in some other capacity, whether that be compliance, tax returns, whatever the case may be. So really just want to make sure our numbers are connecting throughout and everywhere that someone would be looking at our numbers. So really important in that aspect. So a lot of these things have legal components to it, but that's not really the focus today. Today is going to be about energizing your item 19 and how we can do that. So we in the law firm, in our firm, we speak a lot about our brand story, right? Our client's brand story, right? And the way I think about a item 19 is not necessarily a brand story, what the founder's journey is and things like that. When I'm thinking about item 19, I'm talking about our financial story. So anytime I'm speaking with a client, I always ask them, if you were trying to sell me a blank franchise, fill in the brand name, what would be the 3 highlights that you would tell me from a financial perspective only that would be compelling to me, right? And that's the thing. So it could be gross revenue. Maybe you have food costs. You have great food cost numbers. Maybe the fact that it's seasonal. You would want to focus on people that are looking for a seasonal opportunity. The margins are great. Customer retention, right? We have repeat customers, so we don't have to go out and market so much. Maybe you have limited hours, right? The holy grail of franchising these days is finding a 100% passive model, right? Which I think is very difficult, but if you're offering a passive opportunity, we want to make sure we can highlight that, and if that's going to be something that you're going to discuss with us, that's part of your financial story, even though it's not necessarily about dollars and cents directly, right? So it's time. Labor costs, maybe, that's another big hot topic today. People don't want to deal with labor as much as they used to. It's hard to find, they struggle with that. A lot of our clients, a lot of people in the franchise industry struggle with labor costs. So if you have a low labor cost or you don't need much labor for your opportunity, that's a highlight that we definitely want to benefit. That would be a benefit for the franchisee, and we want to highlight. Marketing spend, very similar. And a breakdown of services. Maybe it's the services that we want to break down, and we want to show that we're a service provider, X percent is on lawn care, Y% is on insect care, right? And maybe that's important from your perspective, right? So really finding those three highlights, using the term three uniques, and this would be your financial uniques. What makes you different in that aspect? So that's really important, to discuss. Now, getting to the next point, how do we figure out what our financial story is, right? You may not know. You may say, I think we have great food costs. I love our margins, but it's really important to kind of get someone else's perspective on this, right? And that's important. So discuss with your accountant. Your accountant should know, what generally other restaurants or other food concepts are paying in their food cost. So you may want to ask them, a cold and just say, if you were looking at my business, what would incentivize you to purchase and look favorably our brand versus some of the other restaurants, right? And maybe you can get some really good insight there from an accountant or someone in your financial world. Also in the franchise industry, right? The one great thing, or there's many great things, but one of the great things about the franchising industry is, and that I was actually surprised about, I've been doing this a long time, but as I get more and more into this, it's surprising to me how willing your competitors even, or others in the industry, are willing to help answer any questions or go through any issues that you have, right? And we put together mastermind groups and things like that, and it's really amazing. It's an amazing thing. So if you don't have a mentor, you can call, go to IFA, go meet people, talk with people. People in the franchise industry will help each other, and it's amazing, and we're blessed to be a part of that. But you can really get some really good information from there. Also, look at your competitors. Your competitors, right? Like I said, the FDD is a public document. There's nothing wrong with downloading a competitor's FDD, see what they're showing in their item 19, if they have one, and seeing how your numbers interplay with theirs, right? And maybe that's where you can visualize some market differentiators in from a financial aspect. Also, your industry, right? The industry that you're in. Maybe you have industry set numbers that, if you read a restaurant industry magazine, maybe they say food costs are typically 30%, right? Oh, ours are 20%. You really want to highlight that. So all these things you could do as part of this. Another thing that we talk about all the time in the office, and you may have seen this chart. It's in a lot of our materials, is the opportunity profile of the franchise investments, right? So really understanding what a franchisee would be looking for will impact your item 19, right? So if it's a lifestyle brand, right, hours that we want to work, and maybe, location, I want to work from home at off hours anytime I want, right? So that we want to fit that. If that's something that's compelling for your brand and part of your financial story, we want to make sure that's in the item 19, and we can have a conversation about it. Supplemental income, same thing. If we want to target, teachers that want a job after school at 5 o'clock, maybe that's where we want to focus on. Hours of operation, hours needed. Income replacement, someone who wants to transition over from their corporate job, right? Different conversation, right? And when we're having that conversation, we always want to point to that item 19. One thing to keep in mind, and this is the real crux of the problem, when I say it's not optional, if it's not in our item 19, we can't talk about it, right? We're not allowed to talk about anything that is. So if someone asks us, what is, how much money can I make per hour, right? And I'm a teacher. I want a franchise where I can work after hours on weekends. How much typically can I make an hour tutoring, right? As an example. If we don't have that in our item 19, if we give them an answer, we have now violated the law, right? So that's why it's so important to get this information in the item 19. If we don't talk about it, if we don't put it in here, we can't talk about it. So if we don't have it in our item 19, someone asks us the same question, how much money can I make per hour? What are the hours? I want to supplement my income. Our response has to be, I can't tell you that, which is very difficult. It makes it very difficult to sell franchises that way. So if there is a reason why we have to say that today, I want to make sure tomorrow we're figuring out a way where we can answer that question, moving forward. So really important. Legacy building, right? Maybe that's a multi-unit opportunity, multi-territory opportunity. We want to pass this down to our kids. We want this to be in our family. We're having different conversations and need to show different numbers in our item 19, right? Or else we can't talk about those things. So really important stuff. So one of the things that, that now we have to connect the dots, right? So we have our item 19, which is these are the things that we can discuss. Now we have to talk about our marketing, right? And this is where a lot of the, where we want to highlight those 3 items, right? And that's really important. So do your marketing materials match your item 19, right? So when we see marketing materials, if you told me our 3 financial sweet spots are, we have a lot of, high gross revenue, limited hours. We close at 3 o'clock. We're a breakfast, a breakfast concept, and we sell liquor, which, high margins. If those things aren't in my marketing materials, it's a problem, right? Because that's the thing that's going to compel me. You just told me that's going to compel me to sign a franchise agreement. If we're not showing that and not exhibiting that, that's a big problem. And we can't show that unless it's in our item 19, right? We can't put that in our marketing materials unless it's in our item 19, right? So do the marketing materials demonstrate your financial story? Same thing. We want to make sure that, our item 19 matches our financial story. And we want to make sure that, the marketing materials match the item 19, match the story, and everything connects together, right? We want that seamless connection between all of the areas where prospects are going to look at the franchise opportunity. Also, another thing to keep in mind is that there are situations where you can break down. Let's say, for example, we want to show quartiles, right? This is what a lot of brands do these days. Our top 25% are doing X, right? And we can do things like that. We can be creative in our marketing, but we want to make sure our item 19 reflects that, right? We don't want to have the prospect do the math, right? If we just show gross numbers, we have 10 units, and we say our top quartile, right? Unless it's in our item 19 specifically, where we break down the quartiles in our item 19, I don't want to talk about that. So we have to do the work in the item 19 to make it reflect in the marketing materials. We don't want the franchisee to do their own math, because there are situations, let's say we do have 10 locations open and reporting. We want to disclose top quartile, but we have the numbers don't match exactly, right? It would be 2.5. So where do we put that extra location, right? So it may skew some of the numbers. Again, we want to do the math for everybody. We want a seamless connection between our item 19 and marketing materials, and that's really the game changer right there. So we also have to think about things from the prospect's perspective, right? So that's who's going to be looking at this. You have a franchise prospect. It's not the franchise salesperson that's going to be looking at this. It's not the founder that's going to be looking at this. It's not the franchise attorney that's going to be looking at this. It is the prospect and how they interpret the information. I think we forget that sometimes. We're always taught, know your audience, right? So in this case, we also have to know our audience. I think sometimes we overcomplicate things and don't know our audience necessarily for those situations. So we also have to keep that in mind. Like I said, if we don't disclose this in our item 19, we can't talk about it. And this is the number one area where franchisors get sued, right? Where every single letter we get from a plaintiff's attorney, the first thing, you give a financial performance rep, and that's in violation, and it was in your item 19. You don't even have any numbers in your item 19. So how could you tell us what the ROI is? And those types of situations. So I would say about 90% of the letters we get from plaintiffs, franchisee attorneys, that's the opening statement. You guys did not, you guys made a misrepresentation. And keep in mind, this is not only for the founder or it's everybody in the organization, right? So you really have to train whoever's interfacing with franchisees prior to signing a franchise agreement, really have to train them well and to what they can and cannot say. We just recently started doing more education for our clients and their sales teams, not falling into this trap, because it is a trap. So we want to make sure we have a comprehensive item 19 so we can answer any question they ask, right? That's really the goal. And if we can't get there today, we want to get there, in the future. So anticipating brand specific questions and issues, this is going to come into play like we were talking about before, our brand story, our financial brand story, right? What are they going to ask me if I'm touting that our food costs are really low? What are they going to ask? So we want to make sure we address that and anticipate that. A lot of this is about anticipating so we don't run into a situation, right? So we want to anticipate brand specific questions that they're going to ask us. Also want to, same thing from the prospect shoes. They're also going to ask the general ones, even if it's not part of our financial core. We want to ask, how much money could I make, right? Who's going to buy a franchise when they don't know how much money they can make? And that's where we run into a problem if we don't have our item 19, because you franchisors make decisions. I either answer that and lose a sale, or I don't answer it. If I answer it, I can gain a sale, but I'm potentially breaking the law. If I don't answer it, I lose a sale, I should say. When will I break even, right? That's a huge one. What are the average labor costs, right? Labor is a huge issue. What are the profit margins? What is the average price per ticket, right? So these are just specific general questions that any person who's going to buy a business is really what they're doing. These are the things they're going to ask, right? They need to know this information to make an informed decision. So they're going to always ask these things. So we want to be ready for it. In a perfect world, I want to be our item 19 to have that information in there, so we could just point to that information. And if we don't, I want to have an answer why we don't have it in there, and what the situation is. So expect these questions. One thing, working on projections and pro formas. Again, it's not usually recommended. It's just leaves you open for a lot of issues. So we tend to stay away from it because a plaintiff's lawyer will use that. They'll have a field day with that, we've been involved with a bunch of situations like that. So if you are going to use it, you have to make sure everything's substantiated. Substantiated means that you have all the data that a reasonable person would assume you have making those projections. But it's to me, the standard should be very high. And I really, unless there's a specific situation why, we highly recommend staying away from that. It just opens up the door to too many plaintiffs' lawyers. And if there's any plaintiffs' lawyers watching this, I apologize, but you're the ones we're scared of. Also, the states not registering us as well. But more importantly, I'm thinking about the plaintiffs' lawyers. We used to do a lot of litigation in the firm. We've been involved with these cases, and I can tell you, I put myself in the plaintiff's lawyer's shoes when I'm writing these things. So we have to be really careful with that and keep that in mind as always. So we hear this a lot, and one of the things that we have to make sure if we want to have that information in our item 19, we have to be able to collect the information from our franchisees, right? And this is always a problem for a lot of the brands that we have. So there's some key components to it. I see that work for some of our brands when they can collect the data. One of the things that I think the biggest thing is, brands treating this as a once a year thing, right? We have to do our item 19. We have to report. It's December 15th. Hey, 2 weeks from now, give us your P&Ls. To me, that's a big problem. This has to be part of your year-round operations, right? Collecting information, whether it be monthly, quarterly, you can get away with, but it has to. If we want the information, we want to make sure that we can consistently get the information from our clients and from our franchisees, and that's a year-round responsibility. We can't wait until the end of the year. Then if they don't report, that we get a call. Hey, we had 15 franchisees that didn't report. What do we do? Right. And that's a problem. We can't, we can send out, non-compliance notices and termination notice. We don't want to do that ever. We want it to be consistent, and we want to just keep following up with them. So if they don't report in March, we could do something about it then and just keep franchisees giving information. Another thing that works really well with franchise system is changing the culture. I see this happen a lot where, franchisees, I think inherently, and this is for every system, you can be the best system in the world. franchisees inherently think that franchisor is making all this money, they're taking all this money out of my pocket, and they're naturally gets divisive in a certain way, right? So when the culture changes, the attitude changes, and I think that's really important for to have that understanding with franchisees, and really trying to change the culture of transparency and understanding, and this is the reason why we're collecting these marketing fees, and this is the benefit to it, right? I have the conversation a lot with our clients. We want to, we have to sell. We can't just charge them something. We have to sell it to our franchisees and show them the benefit, and that's really the goal. So when we're changing culture, it helps loosen up some of those restrictions. If someone thinks you're just stealing their money, they're going to be more inclined to hold on to their information. This also helps a lot too. Unified charts of accounts. This is something that makes a franchisor's life easier. If we have a uniform chart of accounts that all the franchisees are using, we can put all those things in the buckets that we need to put them into. If you have 50 different bookkeepers using 50 different charts, it's going to be really hard to collect to get that data to jive with each other, right? So one bookkeeper can think that payroll should be a payroll expense, and another thinks it should be a in a labor category, and it creates a lot of confusion. So if we just want to get a labor number, it creates multi-categories in that, and it just makes it harder to distill the information and cause a lot of problems for the franchisor and franchisee. So if we give them a uniform chart of accounts from day one and say, here are the charts that we want, the categories that we want you to report in, it makes life much easier if everybody's using the same language and same, when we can do it. Another thing that I love, bookkeeping, mandatory bookkeeping, where we could just pull the data from the bookkeeper. So we mandate that they use a bookkeeper that we approve, and this way they're not really focusing on the bookkeeping. To me, if I'm a franchisee, that's a win. I don't like bookkeeping. I think if you're focused on those admin tasks, you're not focusing on growing your business. So a mandatory bookkeeper, a couple $100 a month, may be really worth it. And I've never really come across a situation where we lost a prospect because you're charging a $200 bookkeeping fee. So I don't think you get too much resistance at the outset. When you try to do it later on, it becomes a problem, and it loosens up the resistance of collecting information, later on, and it helps the franchisees actually not waste time bookkeeping where you have someone doing it for them. So if you're at the beginning stages of developing the franchise system, or you can make a change in your system, I highly recommend that. Alleviates a lot of the headache from collecting information. And this kind of goes with culture. This is something that it's something basically the brands that I see where we have much less resistance is when the franchisor is able to convey that if we win, you win, right? If we're able to sell more franchises, it helps the brand awareness. And when you go resell your franchise location, it's going to give you more opportunity and more value, which is true. So if that's kind of being if that's the culture of the organization, it's franchising is supposed to be symbiotic, where franchisor and franchisee are both benefiting from the relationship, right? That's really where we want to be. Doesn't always happen that way, and it's not a perfect world, but if we can get most of our system to believe that, and it's also true, that really helps a lot to collect information from our from the franchisees. So this is and this is where Alyssa's expertise really comes into play. So there is a relationship between item 19 and item 20, right? And I think a lot of our brands and a lot of the brands out there almost kind of think they're distinct with each other, right? This is item 19 and this is item 20. So there are situations, and Alyssa can attest to this, where in our item 19, we're reporting, 10 active locations, and in our item 20, we're showing 6 or 16, right? And it creates a lot of problems with the states. Alyssa, Could you give some insight as to what actually has to be reported in the item 20 versus the item 19 and how that relationship works?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty straightforward that it's clear to say that they do have to match. So whatever you're disclosing in your item 19 has to match your item 20. That doesn't mean you need to report all of the data for all of those locations in item 20, but you have to at least state that as of December 31st or our reporting calendar year, whatever that is described as in your item 19, that we need to have the same number of locations as the item 20. So that may be 20 locations for the 2023 calendar year. But if maybe 5 of those locations didn't open till June and 1 shut down in October because they decided to non-renew this year or decided to leave the system for whatever reason, then we would just need to describe that in the item 19, that yes, we did have 20 locations in 2023. Of those 20 locations, 15 are representative and 5 are not, because 5 were not open for the whole reporting year. So as long as you're explaining why you're not having them directly match, then you're okay with putting a difference in information in. But you just have to have that clarity and that explanation in your item 19.
Great. So that's kind of, yeah, and that's the trick. So a lot of people get this confused, right? They think I signed 25 franchise agreements in 2023, and I should be reporting 25 units in 2023. So just because they signed the franchise agreement, do we have to report them at item 20?
So they'll go into different sections of item 20. So they may be not disclosed in that first initial table where it has all of our active and open and operational locations. But if we're saying we may only have 5 of them of those 20 that may have been open this year. We may have signed 20 franchise agreements in 2023, but only 5 opened. So then we would represent the other 15 in what is table 5, where we say we have these agreements, they're signed, but they're not operational yet. They're still under construction or they're still going through the training process. So as long as those 2 match up as well, a couple different options that you have where you can represent all the information factually and to the better looking way for the system.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, and it gets interesting and it may be beyond the scope of this webinar, but there's a lot of conversations that happen during the renewal process as to territories. If you're a service brand, do you count territories? Do you count actual franchisees and those types of things? And it's really the way we set it up, the way the FDD is set up, where it kind of makes that distinction. But the table 1, where you look at the number of units, the first table, those are active units, right? And the ones, as Alyssa said, those are sold but not open, right? We sold them, but they're not open yet. And there's a lot of confusion there. So in our item 19, we would not show the ones that were sold, not opened, for sure. And there's certain parameters that we would include in the item 19. So let's say, for example, someone opened December 1. They only opened for a month in 2023. Next year's FDD, we shouldn't be disclosing that in item 19 because they only opened for a month. It's not representative based on that definition that the law has. So you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis, but you have to look and make sure it matches. That's really the key. And as Alyssa is saying, there are situations where it's not going to match perfectly intentionally, but then we have to just make sure the information that we're giving, the footnotes and the information, corresponds with each other, so that at the end of it, we can match and say, okay, there was 5 active locations, 5 reporting in item 19, and the other were not open sufficiently to report in item 19. So, but we have to do that analysis, and I think a lot of people they kind of treat them separately, and Alyssa will tell you we get a lot of pushback from the states when they see things like that. And again, the plaintiffs' lawyers, they see that, they say, well, you represented, you had 20 locations open, you only had 5 that should have been reporting, right? That's a misrepresentation. So it's just that simple. So we have to always check that box. Item 20, usually what the way I think about it, just like the financial story we were talking about, I think the item 20 to me is our validation story, right? This is where everything gets validated that we were talking that, you're talking to your prospects about one, how many locations you have open, how many left the system, things like that. But two, it's also the validation story in the sense that we have to disclose information for our existing franchisees and our exiting franchisees, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But this should validate the story that you have with the brand overall, right? Is the brand going, opening locations at a good pace, right? So it's going to show number of locations opening. If people are exiting the system, we want to know, we have to make sure we address that and understand that we may not have that validation based on the conversations that we're having and based on what our materials are showing and based on the perception that we have, right? If we're emerging brand that's growing, we want our item 20 to validate that story for sure. So there's a couple, there's in the item 20, if you're not familiar with it, there's a few different sections. One of the sections that we have that we just spoke about, open and signed but not opened, right? So that's one thing. But really what we have to anticipate it, again, it's about anticipating and being proactive and not being reactive. We have to look at everything from the franchisee's perspective, right? So if in that scenario that Alyssa gave, where we had 20 franchise agreements signed, 5 active franchisees, and we have 15 signed but not open, we are going to get the question of, well, how could you open 15 locations at once, right? Do you have the bandwidth to do that? Do you have a team that's going to be able to facilitate that? That's going to be the question that comes in the franchisee's mind, right? We just look at it as a number, right? We know what we're going to do. It's not a problem. But we really want to anticipate that. And again, put ourselves in the shoes of the franchisee and really be able to answer a lot of those questions. And another part of that item, and in another chart, franchisee's perspective on terminations, right? So if they see a large number of terminations, let's say same scenario, 20 signed, 5 open, but we have 7 terminations, right? What is the prospect going to think? They're going to think that there's a problem in the system. 1, 2, they're going to think, well, these franchisors love to sue people, right? They're terminating everybody, and they're really aggressive. I may not want this in my life. So we really have to keep in mind, and this is also something that we keep in mind during the year, right? We want to limit the terminations if we can, right? We'd rather do a transfer. Transfer looks a little better. So we always want to keep the franchisee's perspective in mind. And then franchisees of non-renewals, reacquired, or other ceased operations, right? I think from a franchisee's perspective, if they see a high number of this, that's going to indicate a problem, right? Ceased operations for other reasons. It could have been COVID, right? Maybe they went out of business. But we want to anticipate answering that question. Why did these territories close? Now, a lot of franchisees may not even look at the item 20, but we want to be ready to answer that and in a good way, because it's going to be important, and could be the factor that sells territories or doesn't. So really important to understand that. Anticipate answering questions about locations, right? This is what we were talking about. How many locations open, closed? The existing franchisee information. So Alyssa, could you give us some insight, right? So these are existing franchisees. This is usually not part of the item 20 directly. So where is it usually located in the FDD?
Yeah, usually it's an exhibit, so it may be after the franchise agreement, or it'll be attached to that full document that you were disclosed with when you first are disclosing FDDs. But usually you're required to include the state the franchisee was located, the name of the franchisee, their last business operations. So are you a brick and mortar location, you may put the address. If you're a service-based franchisor, you may put the business area that they're operating in. You don't have to put a specific location for an address if you don't want to. And then you have to have some kind of contact information. So if they're open and operating, you're going to have to include a phone number that you can contact them at. If they're not operational yet and they're one of those signed but not open locations, you can include an email address to contact them if they don't have a business phone number set up yet.
Great. But their contact information, one way or the other, is going to be in there.
Yes.
So which comes to the really important point. Same thing with the exiting franchisee, right? So if someone leaves the system, what information do we typically have to put in there?
Yeah, you have to include the exact same information. So if they shut down their business phone number, you would have to include the last known email address that you had for them, including their, their service area or location address and their names as well. And you only have to include that for the previous year. So you don't, after 1 year, you don't have to include their information anymore. But if they were terminated in 2023, though, you will have to include that information on your 2024 FDD, and then it would be removed on your 2025 FDD. But it will be there for 1 year.
Okay. So think about this. When we're talking about our item 19, right, this is now the validation story. Right, they're gonna know how many locations opened and closed. They're gonna know how many were terminated, how many didn't renew. But also going back to the financial story, right? They're gonna be able to call these franchisees, and they will, right? They call it validation, where the prospective franchisee will ask them specifically, how is it working with the franchisor? They said, the food costs were, 30%. Is that realistic? They said, most our customers or clients are repeat customers and clients. Is that true? How long did it take you to recoup your investment? Right. So these are all questions that prospective franchisees are going to ask current franchisees and exiting franchisees. Right. So you have to keep that in mind. Even when we're ending a relationship, we want to do it in a good way. Right. If it's possible. It's not always possible and it's tough, but we always have to keep this in mind and think about that phone call that a prospect is making to an exiting franchisee. If the exiting franchisee is saying, yeah, it just didn't work out for me, I ran into an issue, but they're great to work with, right? That's a much better conversation and much better validation than, oh yeah, they tried to sue me, they're a scam, stay away from them, right? And that's what we think about. So we always have to keep this in mind. One, we have to validate the financial story that we were talking about and we're highlighting, because they're going to get to that point most often. Two, we also have to think about the ones that aren't so great. We have to treat them the right way, ultimately to preserve sales, for exiting franchisees when possible. I'm not going to say it's always possible. There's a lot of bitterness sometimes. They invest a lot of money. They'll blame franchisors for everything, and it's hard to navigate that. But when there's an opportunity, sometimes it pays to eat a few dollars to exit in a good way, with keeping the end in mind as far as like franchise sales. So you always have to keep that in mind. Ultimately, the best thing to do, we want to create raving fans, right? And that's really what it's about. For your current franchisees that are in there, we want them to be raving fans. And I think it's really important to kind of sit back and say, why would franchisees consider us raving fans, right? What could we do to be a hero to the franchisee today? And what initiative have we taken to increase the brand, awareness and help the franchisees? If we can't really answer that, we have a problem. So making raving fans a part of this is really going to help sales, right? And the item 20 is really the forgotten story in the FDD. I feel like people ignore it and focus on item 19. Item 19 is very important. Item 20 is just as important, because if we can't validate, guess what? Brokers aren't dealing with you. FSOs aren't dealing with you. You're not closing deals. You're probably just wasting time. So it really is a constant effort, and it's a relationship, right? It's a 20-year relationship. A lot, you hear it all the time. We're marrying our franchisees. It's a 20-year relationship, and you really want to be, a good spouse in a sense, and think about ways where you can get the raving fan, attitude from all the franchisees, whether they're in the system or exiting, right? So really important. That's really the holy grail of selling franchises. So we have a lot of information. For those who aren't familiar with our YouTube channel, Charles does a ton of videos on item 19s and showing your numbers, speaking with brokers like Lisa Welko, and really getting some great insight. It's so important to look at this, one, from the aspect of knowing what you can and can't say for your item 19. That video should be watched by every founder, everybody in the franchise space, all the employees in the franchise, in your brand, in your system, right? So what you can and can't say, so it's just share the video. It's really important. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have pretty much weekly videos that come out. The content's amazing. And, Charles and Melissa do an amazing job on it. And if you have any questions on anything related to the videos, or you just reach out to us, we're happy to answer any questions. And, we have a bunch of resources, item 19 planning resources, things to think about during the process, videos, workbooks, and we're always adding stuff. It's a constant theme for us. We want to make sure our clients are winning at franchising. And really, we want to help the franchise industry as a whole. To me, it's again, a symbiotic relationship. The franchise world is amazing. So anything we can do to help in any way, feel free to reach out to any one of us. But definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel. A lot of the information is there. And anyone listening to this should copy that item 19, what you can and cannot say to franchise candidates, send it to your team, and make sure they're fully informed as to what the legalities are and what that's about. So really important. As always, if you're on the live and want to email Melissa on our team, we'll send over some shirts. They're really comfortable. I wear them every day pretty much. But so any questions anyone has? I know there's been a couple questions in the chat, but happy to discuss. So this is from Kurt. Not sure if you have any mentioned this, but what if you have 20 high performing franchisees and 2 very poor performing franchisees? Do you have to include the 2 very poor ones in the item 19? I'm guessing you do. Yeah. Unfortunately, we have to, but in situations like, the term that they use is you can't cherry pick, right? We can't cherry pick the ones that we want to show, because everybody would cherry pick the good ones. But here's a good situation where we can do a couple things to show the high performers, right? We could do average sales per unit, right? If 20 out of 22 are high performers, that average should be really good, right? So we can show something like that. We can break it down into subcategories, right? Our top quartile, is killing it, and you can show those numbers and really highlight those top quartile numbers whenever you're speaking with prospects. We have to disclose and disclaim a lot of things in that, but at least you have that number. And I think a lot of the to me, one of the important things is going back to that item 20, right? Where those 2 underperforming franchisees, if they get a validation call, because they'll call anyone. My favorite thing is when a brand says, here's a list of all our franchisees, here's their phone numbers and email addresses, feel free to reach out to any single one of them. I love that. And I think if we need to be able to say that, because if we can say that, we're comfortable in the fact that even if they're underperforming, at least they're going to say, we did everything we could to help them, right? We have weekly marketing calls with them. We, try to do everything. And there's no system has 100% a perfect scenario where all the locations are doing really well, right? Things vary. People go through things. Locations differ. So it's really, it's very hard to get 100%, almost impossible, I would say. And once you get to a certain number, but we really want those 2 to be great validators, and that's what I would focus on. So I put the item 19 in a way where we can highlight those, the vast majority that are performing well, and just we can show the 2 underperformers. But I would make it a point internally to say, okay, those 2, they get a validation call. What are they saying to a prospect, right? If they're not saying we did everything we could, then what can we do to get them to say that, right? And that goes back to the raving fans. And it's really important that item 20 gets forgotten, but it's really important. It's something that it's probably silence that you wouldn't hear, right? You have a bunch of prospects, they have FDDs, they did a couple validation calls. you never heard from them again. You followed up. Maybe it's that one phone call they had on the validation call, right, that you didn't know about, right? So we always talk about it internally. Be careful of the silence. You have to watch out for that. Thanks. Holly wrote, do you provide a unified chart of accounts that you would recommend? Yeah, so we work with our clients. It's really brand specific. So there's not really one set that we use for everybody. But we have categories that that we want to highlight based on that financial story that we speak about. So we do set up a chart of accounts, but we do that with our clients. We do it, we kind of tailor it to what we really want to highlight and what prospective franchisees, if they come into the system, the fees that they would incur, right? And that's what we think about. So it's based on the conversation and strategy that we build out with our clients more than anything else. But thank you for the question, Kurt and Holly. All right. Any other questions or anything else? Like I said, always feel free to reach out to any one of us on our team. We're always happy to help and in any way we can. So if you have a question that you think about later on tonight, feel free to email any one of us. Don't forget to email Melissa if you're on the live stream. And I appreciate your time and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alyssa.